I got something pretty exciting this week. If you remember last week's episode, I was talking about the Intrepid 4x5 camera when I was doing the Q&A, and someone had asked, what should I be looking at as far as getting into large format, whether it be 4x5 or 8x10. And this is something that's actually been in the works for a little while now, because a little while back there was a conversation I was having on Twitter with another person as far as, hey, I should maybe give away a 4x5 camera through my channel or something along those lines. And the Intrepid camera company got involved, which I think is perfect timing because it was something I was just talking about very recently. And so what I'm gonna do in this video is I'm gonna talk about their 4x5 camera, talk about some of the features, some of the stuff that I've learned as I've kind of worked with it. I have not had this very long. I just literally got it in today, but based on my experience working with other cameras, I already learned quite a bit about this camera. I will say that this camera was given to me for free by the Intrepid camera company, but here's the thing. It's not really my camera. It is one of your cameras. So one of you that's watching this video will have the opportunity to own this exact camera. So it's basically given to me so that I can give it to you guys. But I'm a big fan of the Intrepid camera company because they are producing a very inexpensive large format camera that makes it possible for people to get into a large format photography. And I think that's very important for my own selfish interest, just from the standpoint that I want to see more people out there shooting film. Because if people are buying film, it maybe might mean that more film will be available and we won't see some of the film going away. So this is a sort of video review of the Intrepid camera 4x5. So let's start by talking about how the camera is made, what it's made of, and kind of the basic design of the camera. So when it ships, it does include this piece right here, which is basically a scrap from the construction of the camera itself. But they found it also kind of doubles a little bit, at least as a ground glass protector, at least for shipping. Even though it doesn't really fit on there exactly as a ground glass protector, you can kind of make it go diagonal like this, which actually covers it from impact. So even though that's really just a scrap from the construction of it, it's actually something useful to hold on to, though you might at some point look for something a little bit more official as a ground glass protector. So the camera is very unique because it is made of plywood. So this is made of birch plywood. And you don't typically see large format cameras made of plywood. And I'm actually surprised that we really haven't seen that yet because it's a very dimensionally stable wood. So basically, we kind of take plywood for granted, but it's pretty impressive in the fact that you take wood kind of shaved from a log in kind of alternating directions. So you have one where the grain goes this way, then that way, then that way. And it makes a really strong material that is dimensionally stable where it's really interesting just the way that they can mill these pieces out of a single piece of plywood as opposed to having 4 pieces of wood put together with the sort of tongue and groove design. The camera itself does have aluminum parts on there as well, so for all the metal fittings and all that, it's all made out of metal, which is nice. And I'm going to go ahead and put it on the tripod here. And what I'm going to show you, first of all, this is a slightly different way that I have folded the camera because it seems like it's a little bit stronger than the way it ships. I'm going to show you the way that it ships. So the way it ships, this right here, which is the assembly of the front standard there, is a bit more like this for shipping. I'll turn this sideways here so you can see a little bit better what we're talking about here. So basically you have this hinge piece right here on the back, and then you have the bellows, you have the front standard, all folds in there really nicely. But what can happen is you see that if it were to compress a lot, it can potentially put some stress on that back part right there. And that could have an effect as far as loosening some of those screws in the long run. There are some cameras made by Chamonix, which is a company out of China. And on their cameras, which by the way are a lot more expensive, they fold a little bit differently. So basically, instead of being folded kind of like you see right there, what's going to happen is you're going to bring this guy all the way up. You bring this all the way around like that. And then this will fold down in here like here. And the reason being that when this drops down here, now you do have this wood piece right here where if it were to be extremely squished, it seems like that might give at least a little bit of a stop. One thing that would be nice is if there was some sort of little spacer piece right in here. And that could be something really simple. You can just take something folded up, put it in there, some little piece of foam or something like that. The camera does depend on these guys right here to keep it in a folded position, which I will say works really well. One thing I found from experience with other cameras is that sometimes if you forget to tighten those down all the way and the camera's in the bag, you try to pull it out, you don't want to accidentally open it up. So one thing I would recommend is getting some sort of strap that goes around there. Could be something very simple. There's all kinds of stuff like that at RAI or other places as well. But very few cameras out there have a really absolute secure way of keeping them latched shut just as it is. So I'm going to show you how basically this opens. So this is going to open up here like this. There's a hard stop on the back, which is nice, so that this is 90 degrees from there. And then on the front, I'm going to take this, and the way that I folded it, I'm going to fold this down here like this. Now, this right here is the screw in sort of the storage position. And you're not going to be able to see this from this camera angle, but basically there's a screw hole right here, and right here. And you can place the front standard there, or there, depending on which lens you're using. The more wide angle the lens you use, the further back you want it to be, because you want to have a shallow distance between there and there. With a little bit of a longer lens, you're going to want it to be right here. Now the lens that I'm going to be demonstrating this is with a 300mm lens. I'll grab that in just a bit. And it's a really long lens, basically the longest lens that this camera can handle. So I'm going to use the furthest away screw there. If I tweak this around a little bit, you'll see the bottom of the front standard. There's basically a slot here, and then there's a little bit of a cutaway right in the middle, which is what we're going to use to help center this. So I'm going to drop the screw through there. That is going to drop down into the hole there. I'm going to get that going in there. Very easy screw to tighten. And if I lock it right to that middle indent, it allows me to line everything up quite nicely. There are some markings on the focusing bed right here, which helps you to keep things aligned. As far as focusing, that is going to be done with, there's a knob here, one on either side, right there and right there. This one right here locks it in place, and then this right here will activate the geared focusing mechanism. And I'm also going to lock this guy in place here because I didn't tighten that one down yet. So I'm going to lock that in place there. So if you have a longer lens, it gives you the ability to focus that out. And if any of you guys are new to large format, one thing you'll find is that a normal lens, which would be somewhere along the lines of a 150mm lens on this camera, doubles nicely for a close-up lens. All you gotta do is overextend those bellows. So if you want to focus on something closer, you just kind of extend those bellows out further, and it gives you a better close-up ability. But you are going to have to measure the distance between there, do a little bit of math, and add a little bit of extra time to your exposure, just because you're actually darkening things a little bit. But it is very smooth to focus. You can see that, oh, there's the limit right there. But I can rack the focus kind of either way. If I had a really wide angle lens on there, I'm reaching my limit right about here. So the front standard could be right about there. I'm going to kind of flush that up there. If we talk about the movements of the camera and what it offers in that regard, for landscape photography, which is probably what this camera is going to be mostly used for, the main thing we're going to look at is going to be the front tilt. So if I loosen these knobs right here, I have the ability to take the front of this and kind of lower it down and kind of raise it up there. There's an indent in the middle, so if I bring this all the way down so you can see, there's kind of a little hole right there in the otherwise grooved channel. And so if I bring this up and then it locks into that hole, basically that centers out the front rise. So with regard to the movements on the front of the camera, if I loosen this a little bit, if I do this, what's going to happen is that my plane of focus, instead of being right here parallel to the film plane, it ends up dropping down a bit like that. It doesn't take very much of an angle on this in order to have the plane of focus go from your feet all the way out to some mountains in the distance. So you can get everything in focus, which is something that's really commonly done for landscapes. This right here is about all you'll need for most situations. There's no zero indent as far as the angle of this, but what you can do is you can look at the wood in relation to the metal, because this right here is 90 degrees. So if this maintains the same distance up and down, it means that we're set 90 degrees, which means no tilt has been applied. The other adjustments you have on the front here, so you're going to have rise and fall. This is what you'd use for if you're correcting for perspective. So basically, if you keep this right here nice and level, you can move the lens up and you can move the lens down to look up and to look down. That's how you'll have the ability to take a picture in a forest with all these vertical trees, but kind of look upward a little bit. You'd do something along these lines. You just have to make sure that the lens that you're using has enough coverage to cover the film on the back, but most 4x5 lenses would have adequate coverage for a camera with this amount of movements. The other movement in the front is the swing. So if I were to loosen this knob a little bit, you can see how I can move this from side to side. And what this is going to do is it's going to make the plane of focus kind of move one way or the other like that. So if you're trying to follow kind of a wall off into the distance, you can do that. It doesn't take a heck of a lot of movement to be able to accomplish that. One thing I do notice is that if I lock this down about as tight as I'm willing to tighten it, which is right there, I still do have the ability to move this. And I think it's because you have plywood and you have plywood, which is going to be basically a smooth surface between the two of them. So there's no real friction there. And as a result, it doesn't completely lock down. But that's just fine, because when you lock this down enough where you feel like it's not gonna move a bit on its own, it's not gonna accidentally get bumped or anything along those lines. But what will happen is you have the ability to kind of move it a little bit, kind of play with it, and it's gonna stay where you're gonna leave it, and you don't have to worry about things accidentally getting bumped. So in some ways, that ends up being a little bit of a feature. I will say it'd be nice if there was a way to completely lock it down, just in case you were to really give it a good bump when the light's getting really good. The lens is going to attach onto the front. So it's going to go onto a standard Linhof Technica type board. And I'm going to go grab one of my lenses that I have conveniently over here in a storage case. But the lens that I'm going to use on this is a 300mm lens, which is about the longest lens that you'll be able to find will go on a camera like this. And that would be equivalent to an 85mm lens if you're shooting a 35mm film camera. So this lens actually will cover an 8x10. So I bought this as my backpacking lens. But I'm going to take off my front and rear caps. So again, this is on a Linhof board. And you'll see how this is going to drop right down here. You'll lift this up a little bit to give it some clearance, and then simply slide that down to lock it in place. And so I found that if I rack the bellows out all the way to the limit, there's a hard stop right about in here. I'll lock that down to firm it up there. This gave me the ability with a 300mm lens to focus on something that's roughly about 9 feet away, which is pretty impressive because I didn't even think I'd be able to focus this 300mm lens anywhere near that close. So definitely fine for distant stuff, but if something's even about 9 feet away or so, you'd be fine. So that's kind of a nice thing to know. When I had my 4x5, I used a 75mm lens, and I also had a 210. I didn't have a 150 at the time, but if I were buying now, I would definitely get a 150 because that's going to be kind of your normal lens. So I'm going to pull this back in, and then we're going to look at the back of the camera. So looking at the back of the camera, we have a fairly standard ground glass on there. Earlier today when I set this camera up outside, I was actually very impressed with the ground glass. I had no problem seeing what was going on. The lens I have on here isn't a particularly fast aperture. I think it's an f8.5, but I was able to see just fine what was going on there. There's a grid on there. There's no level on the camera, but you could use the grid to kind of level things out if need be. Your film holder will go in here, And it has this elastic band. And it is not on there because I was playing with the little ground glass protector piece earlier. But basically your dark slot, or your film holder is going to go in the back here. They have this little mechanism here to prop it up out of the way if you wanted to. I guess that's probably something that could be useful. You prop that up so you can drop your film holder in there. But it might be easy enough just to lift it up and drop it in there. If I let go of this, and then here, you're going to see how it's going to spring back in place there. One thing that's kind of neat, which is sort of almost kind of a hidden feature, and I was trying to figure out how to operate it first until I just kind of moved it. So if you're going from horizontal to vertical, all you do is you simply turn this, and you'll see right there, there's a magnet. There's a magnet over here as well, and it is going to grab at just the right area and kind of lock things in place. So that is actually a lot easier than any other camera I've used as far as switching between horizontal and vertical. In most cases, you have to take the back off, flip it around. So it's kind of a neat little hidden feature there. You don't really have anything as far as rear movements on this camera. If anything, you can partially fold it just a little bit like that to use a little bit of rear tilt. But typically, if I'm going to be using rear tilt, I actually want it to go the other way. But that's just one of the things with regard to maintaining the stability on a camera like this. There's some things you give up. The front movements are going to be the most important to have, so it's good that those are going to be in place there. With regard to the stability of the camera, if I lock this down, make sure that this is locked down as well, it's quite impressive. So if I kind of move these guys here, make sure I can see it there, I can make them move a little bit. But I gotta say, this is very rigid. It actually reminds me of the rigidity of my ebony camera. So I think it's partially because the camera is quite compact. I am very curious how it's gonna be when they come out with the 8x10 camera as far as rigidity, because it's just not quite possible to have that exact same degree of rigidity. The bellows are interesting. It has a material that looks like some sort of like ripstop nylon on the outside, which is a very durable material. And they're a very stiff bellow, which is nice. And it actually, it seems like it would probably resist the wind fairly well. A couple of things would be kind of cool if they added, and just thinking about how clever the design is with regard to the magnets that are embedded in there as far as the rotation. It'd be really cool if there was a true ground glass protector that had magnets installed in it where you'll just click it in place right there. For some of my cameras, I actually made a ground glass protector, which you could easily do for this. It's a piece of mat board that kind of goes in the back here and then kind of goes around the front, and I use gaff tape to kind of put a hinge on it. But overall, I think it is a pretty solid camera. It basically gives all the most important stuff that you need. A 4x5 camera, an 8x10 camera, all it really is a light-proof box with a film on one side, with a lens on one side, and a film holder on the other side. And all it has to do is be able to give you the ability to kind of line things up in just the right way to get everything tack sharp. But if you guys are on the fence at all with regard to getting a large format camera, this is a pretty cool way to get into it. And here's the cool thing. This camera right here was given to me by the Intrepid camera company to give away to one of you guys that is watching this video right now. So here is how you can win this exact camera. All you gotta do is go to my website, benhorn.com, click on the About tab up top, and you're gonna see a form. Enter your name, your email address, and then write a little message saying that you're interested in entering to win the Intrepid camera. And I'll give you guys 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from when I post this video, I will do another video where I'll pick someone at random and I will mail you this camera right here. So I think it's kind of a cool thing that the Intrepid camera company is doing, just because you're making cameras that are very affordable. And I certainly hope that people start shooting more film, because quite frankly, I hate to see some of these films going away. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you around next time.